Frotch rolls forward and goes to the body again, walking through the return fire and pushing Groves towards the ropes. He throws a feint, suggesting he's about to spear in a jab, and Groves, back to the ropes now, covers it with his right hand, but the punch doesn't come. Frotch steps in, and this time he does let his left hand go, aiming a hook to the head which is blocked by that right glove, but it's a decoy. As soon as the punch touches that right gauntlet, like cutting the rope on a catapult, his own right hand comes sailing through. At exactly the same time, Groves attempts a left hook, but the Cobra's straight punch has less distance to travel and is always destined to land first, and land first it does, exploding on an exposed jaw, and the Saint immediately falls, like he's been switched off at the mains. His head and right shoulder buffet the ropes on their way down, and he ends up on his back, right leg bent underneath him. Referee Charlie Fitch swoops in on the stricken fighter, takes a second to look deep into his eyes, and then waves the fight over. The suddenness of it is shocking. It almost doesn't seem right or fair that something that until so recently was so full of potential and possibility can just end like that, without warning, without consultation. But that's boxing, and that's the knockout, and you won't find anything like it anywhere else in the world of sport. It is truly unique. Boxing has fascinated writers for millennia. The earliest surviving description of a knockout was written by Homer in the 23rd book of the Iliad, his epic poem about the Trojan War. Late on in the piece, the Greeks held a number of sporting events as part of a funeral for Patroclus, one of their fallen warriors, and amongst them was boxing. A gentleman called Epeius was first to throw his hat into the ring, followed by Euryalus. When the two men were dressed, they stepped into the middle of the ring. They both put up their mighty hands, and they fell too. Fist met fist. There was a terrible grinding of jaws, and the sweat began to pour from all their limbs. Presently, Euryalus took his eye off his man, and the excellent Epeius, leaping at the chance, gave him a punch on the jaw which knocked him out. His legs were cut from under him, and he was lifted by the blow, like a fish leaping up from the weed-covered sand and falling back into the dark water, when the north wind sends ripples up the beach. His chivalrous opponent gave him a hand and set him on his legs. His followers gathered round and supported him across the ring on trailing feet, spitting clots of blood, with his head lolling on one side. He was still senseless when they put him down in his own corner. I love how evocative the description is, like a fish leaping up from the weed-covered sand and falling back into the dark water, is wonderful. But what strikes me most is how it stands the test of time. It stands that test because what is being described, the dynamic at play, is the same now as it was then. 1184 BCE being a plausible date for the fall of Troy, the setting of the Iliad. Two pugilists, both of whom know the risks and possible consequences of agreeing to face each other, square off, and a momentary lapse by Euryalus is instantly and ruthlessly punished by Epeius. It's what happened at Wembley 3,197 years later. Thankfully, George Groves wasn't as badly hurt as Euryalus. I cut off my description at the very point of the knockout, but something that remains largely forgotten about that episode is that a few seconds after being flat on his back and seemingly dead to the world, George, showing superhuman powers of recovery, got back to his feet. He didn't need Frotch to set him on his legs, as Epeius had sportingly done for Euryalus, and nor did he need his corner to support him across the ring on trailing feet. He regained his feet by himself, and remained on them until he got back to his dressing room deep in the bowels of Wembley Stadium, after conducting himself admirably during the post-fight interviews. That is a key element in what made Frotch vs. Groves so special, and why I've chosen to start the book with it. Knockouts don't get any better than Frotch vs. Groves. It had everything. A great rivalry, an incredible stage, and the signature shocking finish that only a knockout can bring. But crucially, thanks to the fact that Groves wasn't in the same state as Euryalus, it could be enjoyed by spectators free of any guilt.